Very warm welcome to everyone joining us this afternoon, both in person and online. I know we have a number of people joining us online, and I hope it will be possible for them to not just listen, but also place questions at the end if they wish to participate. It's a great honor to have with us today Janet Suzman in conversation with Edith Hall. Janet is one of those people you don't know whether you want to introduce, she needs to be introduced, you want to say something, how do you keep it brief? I suppose all I can say is that she is very distinguished both as an actor and as a director. Her contributions to both theatre and film are so extensive. Her performances, especially of historic and tragic heroines, so powerful. She has an international reputation, numerous awards, nominations. She has been appointed Dame. She holds honorary doctoral degrees from numerous universities. You see what is the challenge here? How do you talk about all of this? So I just gesture at all of that without really getting into any of it. We are very excited to have Janet with us today, and we are also very grateful to Edith for initiating and coordinating this event. The idea is that the two of them will be in conversation for 40-45 minutes. Then there will be time for questions. And then I hope it will be possible for us to continue more informally our discussion over tea and coffee directly next door. So over to Janet and Edith.
Thank you so much, Louise. Yes, it is indeed a very great honour, but I'm fortunate enough to be able to claim anyway that Janet is my friend. I have admired her as only someone as obsessed with theatre and film as I am, and as obsessed with incredible, exemplary older women. But we actually got chatting at a friend of ours' wedding in Athens a few years ago. If you're out there, Yana Zarifi, who is an honorary member of our organisation. But nowadays, we actually see each other more over the campaign for the reunification of what I insist on calling the Parthenon sculptures, not marbles, of which she is a fearless leader. And we'll get back to that right at the end. But I want to take us right back to the beginning, because you were just saying before that the older you get, the more homesick you get actually for South Africa.
I don't know if it's homesick.
What is it?
I don't know.
You said it was like Odysseus.
I did, didn't I?
Yes.
Yes. You've got to get there.
Right.
But I think the landscapes of your youth seem to be haunting your mind the older you get. I think that's quite normal.
And one of your fairly recent performances was, I think, during lockdown. You actually narrated large chunks of the Odyssey at the St. Germain Street Theatre.
I did. I thought we did. No, I did a chunk. It was a remarkable thing to do.
Yes, it was.
A tiny little theatre in the middle of Piccadilly. And all sorts of people rocked up to hear this story, which goes on and on and on, doesn't it? And it was rather wonderful, but there must have been something about storytelling then, which we don't do now. I just reminded myself, I went to a tea ceremony. God, this was amazing. In 1971, Peter Brook invented a language because he wanted to know. Maybe I've talked to you about this.
No, you haven't. This is
not the time.
Peter Brook's. It absolutely
is.
It's August, actually done at, I think, Persepolis,
It was at the tomb of Artaxerxes III.
based largely on bits of Aeschylus's Persians. That was the base text.
No.
I've read it.
You've read it.
I've read the text.
You know it, I don't.
Tell us about actually being at August then.
No, but it was because when we were in Shiraz, we went to a tea ceremony one afternoon in what looked like a mosque cut in half, those beautiful mosaic demi-arches, and a storyteller, a dervish, as they're called. And they clean, I don't know if you know this, it's too wonderful and exciting. They clean those little plates that the glasses of tea are served on by washing them and then throwing them in arcs like a juggler. And all the water droplets splash around, and they dry them that way for the next lot of tea drinking. And these little glasses, half that size, of amber-coloured liquid are passed around, and you're leaning against cushions, and there are people smoking these pipes and everything. It's total, it's magic. And the dervish is telling a story about Cyrus the Great.
Wow.
He's telling a story to the tea drinkers. And I suddenly got a flash of, that's how it ought to be. The German Street Theatre was very far from that.
So you weren't in August?
Irene Worth was in it.
Yes.
Do you remember that great actress? She said to Peter Brook, I want to be in your, there she was. She appeared at the top of, what he did was choose a seminal ancient story, and the one he chose was Prometheus catching fire. What could be more seminal? And 50 feet up on this rock carved full of hieroglyphs, you know, these wonderful bearded, curly faces, ancient people with spears. And a great burning sphere was winched out above the rock face and slowly lowered, slowly, so it caught, all the little flames caught the bas reliefs as it passed. And beneath him was he had chosen an ape-like man, hairy, squat, eager, fierce, to hold a great copper bowl.
Wow.
And this little hairy man stood and watched, rather like with his mother, watching the sphere descend, and eventually this ball of fire was caught in his copper bowl. And if ever a great theatre director managed to encapsulate the idea of catching fire from heaven, that was a moment. That all came from storytelling, which is all theatre people want to do, is tell stories.
But he invented this language that had never existed before.
Avestan. I thought it was Avestan, which is a Zoroastrian ancient language, and Senecan Latin, and ancient Greek. What else?
All sorts, I think.
And the cast knew a past, a present, and a future tense, so they could sort of move along in their studies. That's it. But they knew what they were saying, but we didn't, because Peter Brook wanted to see whether, like music, some languages can, I don't know, carry the idea of tragedy within them, like a minor key in a symphony. Why does it make you feel the way it does? And then change the key into a major key. Do languages have that ability to have sounds which affect you? And that's why Peter Brook did this praised and wonderful experiment. And we were out under the black navy blue stars of Persia. It was Persia still then.
Yeah, it was.
It was unforgettable.
It was, and I think what happened in Iran after that,
it made it not possible to go back.
More poignant, yes, to memorise it. Well, I'm delighted I only found out today you actually saw August, which actually makes me want to touch you. Yeah. But can we return to South Africa and your childhood? So you grew up in quite a rural area.
No, Joburg.
You actually in the city centre.
Wicked old Joburg.
Wicked old Joburg. Did you encounter any sorts of, because you've done so much in terms of both Greek plays and Greek myths and Shakespeare on Roman themes. Did you encounter any of this in your childhood?
If I tell you that my childhood was a cultural desert. It was. Occasionally a visiting company would come. I remember Margot Fontaine coming to the Royal Ballet.
Really?
I remember Beniamino Gigli coming with his great tenor and his tummy to sing to us. I remember a tour from the Stratford Memorial Theatre with Irene Work in it.
Gosh.
I think doing Midsummer Night's Dream. These are dim memories. My mother desperately yanked us to the theatre to try and grab a bit of culture.
She was keen, and there
Well,
was
she wanted, while it was there for 6 weeks in Johannesburg, she thought, I must see this. But the thing that affected me most was a touring production of Annie Get Your Gun and Oklahoma.
How did it make you
I
feel?
know every word of every one
Oh,
of those songs
good.
still.
It's wonderful.
I went 10 times. It was so exciting.
But you met some, you were in contact, your family was in contact with the quite big Greek community in South Africa.
No, what it was, I think I told you the story because you know how everything, the knee bone's connected to the thigh bone. I took my beloved mother on a cruise about maybe, I don't know, 30 years ago. Actually, terribly old. 30 years is nothing. Just nothing. It's passed in a flash. I took her on a cruise to Karnak and Jordan. And she'd always wanted to see these ancient sites. And as a South African, she had to get a visa to land in Jordan to see the Forbidden City and blah, blah. And I didn't know she'd had this enormous trouble not being able to get a visa because she was South African. I had experienced that when I was going to do a film in Mexico. And they said no dogs and South Africans allowed. You can't have a visa.
Because of apartheid.
South Africa was much, Durham state. And so it's the American ambassador who got me a British passport.
Of course it was.
You have to try your every which way. But to your question, I didn't know this about my father. He wholesaled cigars and cigarettes. He imported his cigars from Cuba. And he sold cigarettes to what we call the Greek shops. I think they're Portuguese shops in New York, and I think they're Indian shops in England.
Yeah.
The little shop on the corner was always Greek in Johannesburg. Thousands of Greeks, just like in Australia. And he, my dad, who was not a very good businessman, but a soul with a heart of, a great heart, an elephantine heart. He used to extend credit, as I learned later, to these little struggling Greek shops. And it was never forgotten by the Greek community. So when my mother was struggling to get a passport to go to Jordan, it was the Greek ambassador who intervened and said, we've never forgotten Mr. Suzman's kindness to our Greek.
No.
And he managed to swing the Jordanian ambassador to get my mother a passport. That moved me so much.
Absolutely.
It just means, you know, a good deed wasn't forgotten, and she never told me about it.
No.
But I learned quite recently.
And were you aware at the time of George Bezos as one of now?
No, he became more aware. George Bezos, the great attorney,
Yes.
the equivalent of a QC.
Absolutely.
He defended, he was a big character. And I made a film, and Marlon Brando played him in a film called
Dry White Season.
Yeah, that's
Yes. Wonderful film.
Yeah. And Bezos defended Mandela at the treason trial. So he was a big Greek.
Yeah. And it's still much remembered here
He is
as well.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you twigged there was something wrong, something amiss in the state of South Africa?
In my world.
Yes.
You know, quite early on when I was beginning to learn to read, I worshipped. We had a farm in KwaZulu-Natal.
That's why I thought countryside, because you talked to me about the vistas.
We used to go there in the summer holidays, in the middle of the hills of Natal. We've all read Cry the Beloved Country, the hills of Victoria, the Valley of a Thousand Hills. It's a very beautiful country, misty hills. Zulu is the most cadenced language. It's made for calling over hills. You can hear from far distance people talking to each other over the hills. It's a wonderful language. Anyway, our cook's son was called Ambrose. And aged 5 or 6 or something, I worshipped Ambrose because he had a knack for being a really criminal little boy, which I admire. He could make peas out of chicken wire. He locked my mother in the pantry once and things like that, just clever things. And he used to, I bet you don't know it's anyway. When they needed a chicken for the table, they were all white, these scrawny chickens. They used to run around all over the place, and eventually somebody would do a rugby dive and catch one. And then Ambrose was deputed to wring its neck because he was the best neck wringer around. Sorry about this. This is raw Africa for you. He'd do that, and if you put the chicken back on its legs, it goes on running around for a bit. Bet you didn't know that. And then it falls over. And then, sorry about this, we used to cut out, and I bet nobody has done this. You cut out the little voice box of a chicken. It's a very nice little pink cartilage thing with tiny little hairs on the end. And if you blow through them, they go, wah. And you go, you can actually make chicken noises very nicely. So we used to have chicken concerts, which drove my mother berserk with these chicken voice boxes. Okay, well, that was my cultural heritage. However,
You liked Ambrose.
I loved him, and then I noticed that he was not learning to read the way I was.
Right.
That's what it was. And I said to my mother, why can't he read? And she said, oh, darling, he has his own school to go to, maybe they're a little bit slow, I don't know. And it sort of floated away, but something in me began to nestle in there about separation. So I began to notice things that had seemed quite normal to me, wasn't normal, and stuff like that. And so you grow into a kind of awareness.
And how early were you aware of your aunt Helen Suzman's fearless work in Parliament?
Pretty much, because Henny was South Africa, because the British did very peculiar things in their colonial days. They had the executive capital of the Union of South Africa, as it then was, 1910, in what was then Pretoria.
Yeah.
And they had the parliamentary capital, it still is, in Cape Town, 1,000 miles away. So, and if you sat in Parliament, all parliamentarians had to leave their northern constituencies and go to Cape Town for the parliamentary session. So Helen was never in Joburg, she was in Cape Town. And every summer when we went for our summer holidays to the Cape, which everybody in Johannesburg did, there was Helen, and we used to go and see her, of course, in Parliament. It was a source of both worry and pride to my family, of course, because we were all told to shut up lest it clash with anything Helen might think or say in public. We didn't want Janet Suzman to be fiddled with.
No.
But she was always somebody that and we all did just.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Huge example.
She was terrific.
So did you study in South Africa, or did you run away to study?
Study what?
Drama, anything?
Oh no, I went to drama school in London.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, after finishing university.
What did you study in university then?
English and French.
English and French. That's why you're so good at the French. She was impersonating Sarah Bernhardt doing a scene to me earlier. She's actually heard a very ancient recording. So we had Janet Suzman acting Sarah Bernhardt acting Fed. It was quite something in the Ashmolean Cafe. But you said I asked you what was the first time you realised how powerful Greek tragedy was, and you said something about a Phoenician women with Paxinou.
Yes.
When would that?
The moment I put my pen down for my
60s.
finals, 19.
I was asked he says it's the 60s.
Would it be the 60s?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm afraid so. That's how time
No.
continues itself.
You said it's the Herodotus Atticus.
The Herod
And it was
Atticus,
Alexis Minotis and Katina Paxino.
Paxino, the great Paxino playing.
Jocasta.
Cast.
Amazing role. And you've never seen a Greek tragedy before?
Never
Right.
in my life.
Right.
And there I'm sitting up this thing, and you know that theatre has a black and white orchestra.
Yeah.
This Roman half circle thing. And behind you is the Parthenon, the moon was up. My God, it was exciting, because there were 130 or 150 girls, all the same height with these Phoenician wigs.
Wow. We'll have to look
And you must, it was unbelievably wonderful, I thought. And Paxino on the proscena spouting ancient Greek and
It was in ancient Greek.
yes, well, for all I mean, it could have been in Zulu.
No, it wasn't in modern Greek.
No. I think they did the real thing.
And what was your takeaway? Why did you think it was so
No,
good?
it was the chorus that I
It was chorus.
absolutely knocked out by it, because they were like a snake. They were continually pulsating with what was going on the
Wow.
on the proscena, whatever was being said, they would react to in a line, perfectly choreographed, as if the chorus was a kind of ocean, commenting tidally on what was happening in the play itself.
That's amazing. You were so lucky because, as we discuss quite often here, it was the Greeks in the 1960s who finally got people to realise that the chorus was not a bunch of old white men standing.
Yes,
It was like Carolus Coon
and also the music was extraordinary.
Was it?
Yes.
Was it?
Yeah.
So you come to London.
Yes, and I went to drama school.
You go to drama school where you told me you did voice for 2 whole years, and why don't people do
No,
that?
what I'm saying was that they don't teach, you may have noticed that all actors nowadays have microphones. Shame on them, because you don't need the damn things. If you're taught voice properly at drama school, why would you need a microphone? But that's what's happened. The Royal Shakespeare Company was invited to Los Angeles in 1967.
When did you join them?
1960.
Yeah.
That was the Wars of the Roses.
Yeah, what?
Peter Hall's,
Amazing.
John Barton's amazing Wars of the Roses. Oh, I'll give you a bit of French.
Good.
This is stuck in my mind. The first day of that performance was an all-day thing. 10 o'clock in the morning till 1, break for lunch. 2 o'clock till 5, break for supper. 7 o'clock till 11. That was your theatre-going day. Everybody made friends with their neighbours. By the end, it was just a wonderful experience to go all day to have a story told you. Wonderful. And it ends up, of course. Anyway, it was midnight by the time he drunkenly left the duck. The dirty duck, and wended home. And I remember being struck by the back of a man gazing intently through the dark glass of a shoe shop in Sheep Street, Stratford. And as I passed him, I heard him say in French, I will translate it, "Ah, ce coup de mouchoir, comme c'était terrible. Oh, that slap of the handkerchief. How terrible that was." And he was referring to Peggy Ashcroft slapping Donald Sinden's face with a bloody handkerchief, the blood of his son on it. And there was somebody stock still at midnight, remembering this event.
That's extraordinary.
That's what theatre.
That's theatre. That's theatre.
Is a moment that catches you or sears your retina. It's interesting.
So stay long enough in the 1960s. Were you involved with apparently there was a big memorial for Atul Fugard last night that Janet was at, talking to John Carney. Were you directly involved in the island or any of the other productions?
No, those were.
Because there's a connection with you about this, and I've never fully got it. Is it that you went back and directed there later?
Yeah. In 1987.
Yeah.
Well. All right, let's go back. in 1976, some like-minded friends, two of them geniuses, one Athol Fugard and his colleague and cohort called Barney Simon, founded something called the Market Theatre. Many of you heard of the Market? It was incredibly famous in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s. And out of that came a lot of what you call protest theatre from South Africa. And all the ones you're quoting of Athol's came out of that organisation. It was an old octagonal building in an old Indian marketplace in downtown Johannesburg, in what they euphemistically called a grey area, neither black nor white. And they got this building, which was literally a marketplace, so you could hear signs, see signs still up saying chickens, or don't spit, or that kind of thing, which they kept. And it was octagonal, so it suddenly became a globe. Suddenly became a little mini globe in downtown Johannesburg. And that was turned into the one place in Johannesburg where you could speak freely, a theatre, and think, you know, think about things other than your navel. And that's where all the good work started. And then in '87, I went out. I used to go out all the time because what was happening in South Africa pulled at me somehow. And it was one April, I was there, and I went to the Market Theatre and I saw a play, and I saw John Carney, whom I knew. I had met him in Athol's young company called the Serpent Players 10 years before. No, 15 years before. And he was doing a play of enormous indifference. And I thought, oh, John, you need something better than this. And into my head popped the word Othello. And I thought, yes, that's what he should be playing. Othello.
Yeah.
That's what he should be doing. He's ready for it. Yes. I think I am too. And it wasn't a play I'd ever done before. But I just had this feeling. So I rushed across the next day to the university bookshop to find a copy. Could I find one? No. It was a band play.
Was it banned?
Banned.
Oh,
A band play. But I did find in a lower shelf somewhere down there some Japanese copies in comic strip. You know, with those big Japanese
mangoes.
Yes, that kind of thing. Anyway, I went to my mother's bookshelf. My mother, of course, had limited editions, and she had those first edition copies with the S's as F's, which you have to plow through. It's terrible to read that script, but kind of wonderful. And I read Othello and I thought, this is it. Because in Act 3, Scene 3, when Iago is dropping poison into Othello's ear, what he's saying is, don't marry out of your own drawer, old boy. Stick to your own clime, complexion, and degree. And I thought, well, that's a perfect description of apartheid.
Yeah.
That's what apartheid is about. No miscegenation, don't mix. That's what it's, we've got to do this play. So we did.
Fantastic, and that's why you and John have been.
So when you work
directed
together,
it.
well, when you work together, you get to know each other very well.
Yeah. Did you direct it?
Yes.
Yes.
I said to John that next morning, I said, you have to take my arm in case we both stumble. I said, A, you have to play this part, because I've never done Shakespeare, but I said, no. And he said, I have to direct it.
Right.
I said, you. I said, yes.
Was that your first outing as director?
That was my very first, I think I could look back and say, it wasn't more than I could chew, but I chewed it.
Yes. Well done.
Put it that way.
So let's get back to John Barton. So look, Janet came with great gifts for the archive, and if you've got shoe boxes of memorabilia, we do collect and make sure that they will be of use to researchers ever in the future. So please don't throw out your theatre memorabilia. I actually have a thing in my will leaving anything to do with the ancient Greeks and theatre to the archive. And so the Greeks, anybody here remember the Greeks?
Yeah.
John Barton? Oh,
You might, I've got a helmet from,
You've got a helmet.
yeah, I bought it from
Did
the
you?
RSC sale.
Really?
you really? You should have worn it today.
I could donate it.
You will.
I could donate, yeah, help it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That would be
Oh, that's very
wonderful.
nice.
And Janet brought, I think Janet, this was a 10-part, it was 10-part rewriting of Euripides' plays about the Trojan
The
War.
whole damn story.
That's right.
all collated together. He invented one book called the Achilles.
That's right.
Yes.
But that was out of the Iliad.
Doesn't matter. He didn't care.
No.
Telling the story.
No. And you said you reread it recently, and it's
It's very good.
incredibly good
It
read.
should be done again.
And how many hours did the whole thing take?
Same as the Wars and Roses.
Yeah.
You were in your seat at 10.
Yeah.
Remember this?
I didn't, no.
You did.
Gentleman here.
So, you did. Did you come to the whole day?
No.
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 But if you didn't come to the whole day, you won't have seen Janet. And then she just stood, these dropped out. She didn't even know they were there. So I'll leave them on the table if you want to look before you go to tea. So she's Helen in the morning.
No, in the evening.
Oh, your Clytemnestra in the morning.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, in the afternoon.
Looking utterly gorgeous in both, but with long dark curly wig as Clytemnestra, intent upon murder and mayhem.
Yes.
And as a clearly
Bonkers.
empty. Did you played a bonkers? I remember
No,
empty-headed.
this Helen was spirited away to Egypt.
That's right. It
Yes.
was Euripides' Helen. Exactly.
Yes.
So she's camping out in her sunbathing on the
sarcophagus.
tomb on the
Yes.
sarcophagus.
Yes.
Exactly. Absolutely stunning. So you fell madly in love with sort of Greek myth and doing the Greeks. And then there was another performance at a London theatre, wasn't there? Just called the Greeks or something. What was the other one called? I think that may have been the one I saw actually. Which you got you've put the Greeks was fab, just reread it, should do it again. Oh yeah, the war at the Old Witch. And
The what?
you took the Clytemnestra bit to the Old Witch. You did?
No, that's where it started.
Oh, it was where it started.
It started
That's
with
the
the
war.
old. It was an old witch thing.
Oh, I see.
The war, the murders, the gods.
Janet
10 a.m. in the
Suzman
morning.
as Clytemnestra dominated the production in a powerful performance. Beautifully shaded. So there you go. It's all about you.
Well, the thing about Greek plays is they're difficult to shade.
Do you think so?
Yes, I know so.
Can you?
Well, what Shakespeare does, because he invented human beings, right?
Okay. Let's have a
He
Socrates
has-
versus Shakespeare,
Well,
shall we?
no, as an actor, there are so many colours and nuances and antitheses and all sorts of subtle clues about the impossibility of human nature in Shakespeare. And in the Greeks, it's like something, an animal has grabbed you and you've got to deal with it somehow. Like, I don't know how to describe it. The verse is nakeder. It doesn't go through the ins and outs and nuances of Shakespeare's examination of a soul in torment or in a problem or in a crisis. And so the Greek thing is suddenly you are stricken by this thing called lust or love or whatever it is. And you have to deal with it as if it's an octopus that's suddenly got hold of you and won't let go. So it's a very different, almost it's outside in rather than inside out,
Yes.
in a way.
Because you've played Volumnia, Calpurnia, Cleopatra. How many Shakespearean ladies have you played who were from antiquity?
Well, for instance, Volumnia, I think, she has a reputation as a sort of battle axe, but I think Shakespeare didn't write battle axes. He was just too stuffy for that. He never did. So she's a very, very commonsensical mother. She keeps on saying, stop behaving like an ass.
Yeah.
To Coriolanus, which he's the one who can't let go of his octopus. Let's put it that way. But I think she's very considerable character, and she's not just one colour. And I think a lot of people are seen as kind of human.
And did you bring your experience as a single mother of a very able son to this?
You can't help doing
No.
that, you know. Sometimes your boy behaves like an ass. So you've got to just pull yourself together.
So we have to get on to Cleopatra, because otherwise people will tell me I didn't use the time properly. I don't know if any of you heard a few weeks ago, there was a marvellous Radio 4 programme. Well, I liked it. You're saying you didn't like it.
No, I
There
did.
were three women actors who played Cleopatra. Jane Judy Dench, you, and I can't remember who the other one was.
I'm afraid I can't know that. I'm sorry.
It's up against Janet Suzman off, who we're talking about.
No, I don't think it's that. I think that it's part that is so interesting that you can't just dip in and out.
And did you first play it under the direction of your then husband?
Yes, I did. Trevor Nunn directed it.
And you were still an item. So how did that affect it, that you were playing a woman in love?
No,
It was just a job.
no, what we were doing was playing Antony and Cleopatra.
Right.
The story is not the story of a woman in love.
This is where you and Dame Judy seem
Well,
to
it
differ.
isn't. No,
Dame Judy thinks that Cleopatra is madly in love from get-go, and you don't.
no, I think something much more interesting happens to Cleopatra, which is she needs Antony, which is why she dresses up to the nines and has this barge to seduce him. I mean, who could resist that? And then dinner on board, and then, you know, I mean, he was a goner, wasn't he? Left whistling in the marketplace, as they say. And then he liked how he lived in Egypt, and she liked having, well, there wasn't a queen on the throne that could ever govern without a consort. That is the fate of women queens. Queen Elizabeth did it brilliantly because she adopted her virgin queen thing, so she was untouchable, and eluded marrying all the Philips of Spain that were being thrown over, and so on, so that she could have absolute power. And Cleopatra, so she didn't want to share power, and she wanted to pass Egypt on to her, it's in the play, to her heirs. And of course, her first heir was Caesar's son. Her affair with Caesar is very interesting. That crops up throughout the play.
Do you think so?
Oh, yes.
Do you think she was in love with him?
Oh, I think when a Julius Caesar comes the way of a 16 or 17-year-old and starts taking her under his wing, she apparently, I hear from my Egyptologist friends, took him up the Nile on her famous barge. And wherever she went, the priests came out and, you know, it was the best run theology in the ancient, theocracy in the ancient world. Due to her, Cleopatra, she was just good at that. But she had to produce an iconic figure, so she produced the goddess Isis, exactly as Queen Elizabeth did with her virgin queen. And she used to dress as Isis as the barge appeared at all these temples along the Nile. And the priest came up to worship her, and up she went to Aswan and back down again. It was there, I think, when Julius Caesar got this idea of how interesting it would be to be an emperor. Hence he was murdered. Hence he was murdered.
This resurfaces in Antony and Cleopatra.
Yes. Anyway, Julius Caesar pops up and down, up and down, up and down. She keeps on castigating Charmian for it. You know, Charmian is the one who knows her best, handmaid, and teases her. You know, she's always teasing her about Julius Caesar. She even portrays herself with Phidias, the messenger of Caesar. Your Caesar's father used to kiss me just there. And in walks Antony, favors. Yes, favors. Yes, indeed.
So at what point do you, in your interpretation of the role, at what point do you think she does actually fall for Antony?
I think, like all of us in the world, you only realise what you've lost when you've lost it.
So after he does.
I think the full flood of what she has lost, of course she helped him, but not with that blind craziness of that woman.
Yes.
Very adorable.
So let's talk a bit about the early 90s, because this is unbelievable. Janet has given us her whole leaflet of Ariane Nouchkine's Les Atrides, played in France,
Yes,
which Janet confided for the archive. Thank you so very much.
yes.
Which Janet has confided in us was, if the Phoenician Women was your first blinding
It was.
introduction to Greek tragedy, this is, you said to us in the restaurant, the most outstanding production of anything you have ever seen.
Of any big play. Yes,
So tell us
any
why.
big play, because it was big and it's savage. And I think what Nouchkine did was to
This is 1990, wasn't it?
just, there's a picture on the back of that magazine.
Oh, God, yes.
What,
Maybe like the
what she
Chinese
did, you
terracotta
can't
army.
see that. There's a picture of a ditch here with what looks like the terracotta army standing in it forever, for eternity, being dug up. And you cross that bridge into this other world that she was about to tell you about in the House of Atreus. And it was that drawing you away from the ordinary, boring, real world into another time, which we know nothing about. It's savage beyond, it's foreign to us beyond belief, but it tells stories that we can ingest. But it's completely foreign to us. Who were the gods? What were they like? Why were they like that? What did they do to human beings? What did human beings want? How did they live? Impossible for us to know. Impossible for us to know. We can look at all the Panathenaic things around the Parthenon, and we can look at what's left of ancient Greece, and still it's mysterious. Which is why I suppose he recreated Colossus. He had to create something that made sense to him, because it's lost, it's gone. We don't know how they sounded, how they spoke, how they danced, everybody tries their best to recreate that, but we'll never know. So she did it imaginatively.
Yes.
And I thought that was daring.
And you really liked this transcultural theatre that mixes, like orgasm.
Well, theatre is not there to be accurate. I mean, Shakespeare's unbelievably slapdash about chronology and time.
Yes.
He couldn't be
Ticking
bothered.
clocks and ties.
Yeah, this and yeah, that. He couldn't be asked about it. That's not the point.
No.
The point is what happens.
But it was an extraordinary chorus. I mean, when they marched on in the Agamemnon.
Well, there's that word chorus.
Yeah.
You know, usually theatres could only afford 3.
Yeah.
At the most.
Yeah.
But to get 33, but it's like a big orchestra.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a musician and you want a big sound, you have to have a big orchestra, you know. And so that's the same in theatre, but nobody can afford it,
No.
unfortunately.
Exactly.
That's the way it is.
But it was about that time that you were invited by Andre Serban to do.
No, I think, you know, I invited him.
Okay.
And I think maybe that was the problem. Well, he lost interest in the play.
He lost interest in it. You wanted to do Euripides Hippolytus.
Mm.
Why did you want to do
I don't
Euripides
know.
Hippolytus? Okay.
I thought I should explore the opposite of Cleopatra.
How is she the opposite of Cleopatra?
Well, because she is stricken and taken where Cleopatra is not.
Right.
The best scene, the best, strangest, there are 5 words in Antony and Cleopatra, which tell me the difference between Euripides we know and the Shakespeare we know. That's dead, not 4 words. When Antony, drunk and enraged, says, "Take this grizzled head and give it to Caesar." And she says, "That head, my lord." Peggy Ashcroft thought those 4 words were the shortest, most complete love poem in the English language.
Oh.
That she was wordless to describe that head. And I think it's like Cleopatra watching in slow-mo a car crash. That head has lost its way. That head is not functioning. that head is leading to disaster. And that's all she can say quietly. That head. Well, that's very great writing. To pack so much possibility into 4 words, huh? In the middle of a scene is astonishing. But that's, for me, was the absolute key to Cleopatra. That she was breathless with terror that was leading to disaster, which it did. And so when he died, you can tell by, sorry to...
No.
You can tell by Shakespeare's verse, the way it elevates itself into very great poetry the moment he dies. The moment he dies, the quality of Cleopatra's verse is stratospheric.
Yes.
It changes completely. And she becomes like King Lear. When he finds he's a poor forked animal in the storm, when he is a nothing, when being a king means nothing, she discovers exactly the same thing. No more but being a woman. That's what she says after he dies. That's all I am. I'm not a king. The maid that milks and does the women's chairs. That's her. So she has an insight into her own minuscule life.
Yes.
Which is astonishing.
It's a sort of cosmic perspective.
So that means that Shakespeare's trying with a woman character to give her the kind of metaphysical weight that he has given to his main characters,
and so on.
which is why both have never played it.
No.
There we go.
And I honestly don't think Phaedra has anything like that. And because she dies halfway through, and then it's just a sort of male loving, for
Fred's
the rest of
Yeah,
the.
I think it's a really, really hard play to
Yes, so do I.
make come alive.
I think it's also a very hard play to make sense of post-feminism because it's the foundational rape lie, and I hate it.
But I also have a
I hate
feeling,
the play.
yeah,
I want to do role reversal. Anyway, that's not, I'm not interviewing you.
okay. No, well, I want to say something about, can I just
Yes.
say the last thing?
I want to talk, somebody needs to ask about the Parthenon.
Oh, okay. Why do women always get saddled with this eternal love sting?
Yeah.
Because they've got nothing to do. They have nothing to do day in and day out.
Yeah.
They lie about on cushions and bemoan their faith. They're not allowed to fight. They're not allowed to go outside. They're not allowed to have debates. They're not allowed to do this. They're not allowed to do that. So they're stuck at home thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what brings on what the French call accidia, l'heure bleue. The women,
Madame Bovary.
yes, there's nothing to do. And that's why, men just put this self-immolation on them.
You're absolutely right. In that play, you've actually got, Hippolytus thrilled running around hunting. With
He's
hunting,
sitting there way over there.
Theseus is off at the oracle,
Yes.
making laws,
And she's got nothing to do but think about
funny.
anything. Anything rather than,
So,
it's a terrible fate being
I
over
think-
the centuries, isn't it? Gosh.
last question again, because you want to write now, which is great. I've been trying to get Janet to write her memoir. Please. And you have come in as our chair of the British Committee for the Reunification of Parthenon Marbles,
Yeah.
and highly energetic.
Scott.
Scott, thank you. How long ago you met Melina McCory on that, didn't you?
Yeah, the great
She's been
Melina.
involved for many, many years.
Well, she was like a tornado. She swept into England.
Yeah.
With the autumn leaves swirling behind her. And every slightly lefty actress like me and Vanessa and people were swept up in her wake.
Really?
Oh, yes, very much so. And she was damn right.
Yes,
And she was a woman culture minister.
she was.
For that you had to respect her.
Yeah.
And she said, get them back. And did it. She made little speeches in the Oxford Union.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Apparently Boris Johnson
Was very pro her.
pro on that side.
They discovered an essay.
He's such an opportunist.
Yeah. It's before he ruined himself.
No, it's long ago, but I was very struck to
But
discover that
he was a vivid writer,
Yeah,
Boris.
right.
And he wrote very well about how they should be back in the in the Aegean light of home these days.
Yeah.
I have no business
absolutely.
in grey, dull.
Are you hopeful? Are you hopeful? I am cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously.
Yeah.
I just think there's an old colonial bent in trustees and old,
Yeah,
forgive me, old fogey people who think somehow that they ought to stay here. And I still have not heard one good reason why they should. I just haven't seen it, except that they're ours now, finders keepers. And they got there in such shady, to say the least, circumstances. I mean, really shady, not to say sleazy. Sorry about that, but it's true. And they should be going back. And the Greeks have been asking them for 200 years. So, no, it's time.
it's done.
It's time. So they have to. But I think the old guard still wield a lot of influence.
Yes.
And so that's going to be the difficult thing. The day when there's enough enlightened trustees in the British Museum to say, of course they should go back. We've had them for 200-300 years now. They must go back to where they belong, which is where they ought to be. It's very interesting. I'm going to show off here because I met the then but two president of Greece when we were there on a conference. And he called me into his study and he said, I want to make something very clear. We don't want any other piece of marble or sculpture that anybody in any other museum has back. We only want what Elgin took from the Parthenon. That's it. That's our entire ask. We're happy the Samothrace is in the Louvre. We're happy all these museums have bits of ancient culture, our ancient culture, but not those. He was very clear about that. And I believed him.
Well, that's the answer to the floodgates argument.
Yes, it is. It's nonsense. Nonsense. Yeah.
I think we should thank Janet very much indeed and answer some questions.
Yes.
Thank you for your generosity over these materials.
I'm delighted.
Would you like to curate the question?
Yes,
Thank you.
so questions from the audience that is physically in the room, and maybe at this point we should also involve the audience that has been following online. So if we can.
Yes, lots of questions, but I remember going to the theatre and it was very exciting seeing the protest theatre, but that seems to have gone now.
Well,
Is that
the
because
enemy is gone. What are you wrote about?
Well, no, but
That's the trouble.
but political theatre as was, that seems to, is that because of money? Is that or
No, it's because what are you write about?
okay?
You know, when you've got a bullseye to aim at, it focuses the mind so brilliantly. That's why those protest plays were so good. They were satirical, they were sharp, a lot of them were funny. Othello was a great poet's view of that whole disaster, and so on and so on and so on. And when suddenly the enemy is black, you can't, your hands are tied. And I think there is a lot to write about in South Africa, but they haven't got there yet. Maybe it takes a few more years to mature in writers, you know.
Sorry.
Well, this is from Yana Zarifi,
It's Yana.
Yana,
who says, it's not a question, but thank you from Yana to Janet for reawakening the thrill we had when we went together to Paris to see Mushkin's treat. Also for the beginning of a friendship that started when I wrote to her, having been bowled over by her film of Othello. Thank you both.
oh,
Oh, thank you, Yana.
thank you, Yana.
See you next week.
Oh,
Yes.
Thank you very much. I was really interested in what you said about the comparison between Shakespearean and Greek heroines. But I was lucky enough when I was a student to be in a Greek play and we acted it in a Greek theatre. And I was incredibly struck by the weight of the size, proximity to the city. It's just a whole different audience, if you like. And particularly the fact they were male. And so these women are under this gaze which is entirely, in some ways, antithetical to them. Did you feel when you were playing Greek heroines that you had to act in a different way? A different way from, say, the more interior way of acting a Shakespearean heroine? Because just so much to speak to.
I hadn't thought of it that way. Of course, one of the things you have to get used to in drama up to probably these recent years is how the lives of the major female figures in drama are subsidiary to the patriarchy they swim in. This is why octopus is quite a good idea. It'll do for something that touches you. But I also think that the trouble is translation. I would wish to act it in ancient Greek, but I can't do it. And so I have to, the moment you get to a play that needs translation, you're in a different land. And I think having done Ibsen and Chekhov, you enter that land where you can be, in a sense, more iconoclastic or more creative, because now you have a chance to read 3 or 4 or even 5 different translations coming out of different minds of what they think it means, or they think how it sits with the character. And actually, you can choose what suits you and the production best, somehow. And I've done that with both Ibsen and Chekhov, and it works. It works because you can't do it in the original. You know, so that's a completely different thing. And I think that is the problem. We don't have that orchestral sound or whatever the linguistic sound was of ancient Greek in our tongues. We don't have whatever noises they made. I'm sure there were noises that we don't know anything about. When you get I's or O's, or, I know in Shakespeare you get R or O. They're always some kind of a big sound. They can't just be O. There's something, cry, some visceral thing that happens. And it's just spelt O-H or A-A, O-A. You know, so I think that's the problem. It must be linguistic. We're not at the fountainhead. We're at a remove from it. And that impedes us from really getting the feel of it, I think.
Speaking of cultural difference, Janet's taught Shakespeare in India. Please, this cracked me up so much.
I was a friend of mine, a very, very dear friend. Oh God, I'm going to tell you another story about her. Her name was Pearl. She rhymed like a pearl. She was divine, I loved her. She was at drama school with me. And when I was filming Mountbatten, the last viceroy of India, we were in Rajasthan. And they were burning tires and things, you know, war in the streets and blah, blah. And at the end of the day, in this little village, a little old lady came out of her hovel and went, made this gesture. And we all said, what's she saying? She's saying, hurry up, I want to make my chapatis. Get out. And anyway, these lorries, huge pantechnicons of film lorries, started edging out to go back to Delhi for the evening. And there were lots of little children under the peepal trees, smiling, lovely big smiles, smiling and waving, and we were all waving and smiling. And Pearl collapsed with laughter. I said, why are you laughing? She said, you should hear what they're saying. I said, what? She's saying, they're saying, bye-bye, pink pigs. I thought that was so clever. That's exactly what we look like with those beautiful Indian dishes.
What about?
Oh yes, so then she got me to teach a sonnet to a children's school one morning. And I did, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So I started saying to them, I started reading it to them. They collapsed in hysterics. And again, I'm always saying, oh, why are you laughing to people? It happens to me all the time. And I said, why are you laughing? And the teacher next to me said, you can't wish somebody a summer's day in Delhi. It's the worst thing you can wish.
It's a wonderful example of that cultural relativism dealing with poetry. You know?
I felt such a fool. We all think it's universal.
Exactly.
Forget it.
Laurencia?
Yes, so there's a question from one of our online attendees. It says, can you talk about the scenes from the Oresteia in the 1980 BBC program called The Greeks, A Journey, Space and Time? You played a magnificent Clytemnestra in that series, and I'm wondering whether you performed the entire trilogy or just the scenes that we see in the program.
Did I? This is a terrible thing.
If it's the Greeks, the journey in space and time, it's probably to do with Barton.
It must be this.
Yes, it must be.
I can't remember, but maybe they filmed this. Tell him I can't remember, I'm sorry.
I think it must have been a shortened,
Must have been an extract. Yeah,
but here you are.
yes, there are.
Clytemnestra, which 1980, yes, and the date fits.
Yes, I'd forgotten they filmed.
Great wigs though, Janet, look at that.
I tell you, that's there are so many pieces of art that have disappeared from the theatre scene. That will never be seen again. Wig makers.
Yeah.
And people who build costumes.
Yeah.
From a drawing, a designer goes, and gives it to the costume department, and they build it into something that an actor can wear easily.
You think it's a lost art?
Completely. We had armourers. John Barton wanted sparks to come off the swords, you know, in the big fights in Henry VI. So he got an armourer to come along, and they were experimenting with mixtures of iron and steel to see the optimum mixture that would spark when they made a sword, and they got one. So flash, clang, spark, spark. He wanted that. He got it. But you wouldn't find an armourer able to do that. Maybe somewhere. They're all the great talents, craft talents have gone into film.
Can you speak a little more about your time at Stratford in the 70s with more details like the armourers and the sort of world of people being in rep and having big parts in some plays and small parts in others before the star system completely took over?
Yes, you have a point. I think the kind of work that was done then can't happen anymore because you won't get actors signing for 3-year contracts. And they could only do that because they'd have a zonking part in one play, smaller part in another, maybe a part in another, and also there would be this rep between Stratford and London. The Aldrich was buzzing with work. But now it's got Tina Turner in it or something, but it used to be the home of Shakespeare, that Aldrich Theatre. It was a wonderful place to be because it's exactly the right size.
And they won't sign 3-year contracts because they want to go and do TV.
They wanted to make money. So I think there's a very, very, very different attitude now. We used to come in the mornings at 10 o'clock, you'd work till 1, you'd take a bite, you'd probably do a matinee, you'd have an hour's break, and then you'd do an evening performance, and then you were back in at 10 o'clock doing classes on sonnets and verse and stuff like that. And I remember dress rehearsals going on at 3 a.m. and nobody turned a hair. It was just the way it was. It took as long as it took. And then arrived Vanessa's brother, Colin, and he was a fervent member of the Workers' Revolutionary Party. And I remember him actually, I suddenly remember this. I dreamed there was an emperor at and a voice from the back of the auditorium said, "Trev, it's 5." Oh, really? Okay, he said, "Sorry, got to stop now." And another time, I'm not name dropping, it's one of the most exciting times I've ever had. I made a film with Fellini in Rome, and he took me to Cinecittà.
Which film was that?
It was called E la nave va, which means the boat sails on. And he wanted to show me Cinecittà, where all these people were. He'd been making films with the same group, the makeup artists, the costumiers, the prop people, the cinematographers, the lighting people, for years. And he said, "I can't make films anymore," because they stopped me at 5. I have to finish a shot. How can I make a film if I'm stopped all the time? So this was the intervention of union hours, which largely stopped people in their tracks as regards creativity. Read that how you might. But I promise you, doing a day of hard work in the theatre is not the same as being down the mines. It just isn't. You will recover from the hard day's work in the theatre without being hurt. So I have very little time for that sort of thing. But that's how it was. It was very, very exciting.
One last question. I'm aware that there are a few hands that were hoping to come into the discussion, but there's time for just one last question.
It's a very quick one. Which do you think was your greatest role?
I don't know, it's not for me. I don't know. The thing that has obsessed me most has been Antony and Cleopatra, because it's just the best play I've ever done. Best part for a woman that's ever been written. Has to be. And Hedda Gabler, both. There's nothing like those two. Just shows how pathetic women's choice is. It's pathetic, isn't it? Honestly, because if I'm a man, I've got dozens of plays still to do. And they aren't around for women. So things may improve when women get into the public marketplace and have not only the domestic to deal with, then there will be more stories to tell.
Well, very fitting note to end on. That's been an incredible romp through an incredible life. Thank you so much. Can you promise to write that memoir written? And can we thank Janet once more?